The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble corridors of Ravencrest Palace, but today its golden light seemed dimmed by an unspoken sorrow that hung heavy in the air. Princess Isabella stood at the tall windows of the East Wing, her delicate fingers pressed against the cool glass as she watched the royal gardens below. The roses that had bloomed so brilliantly just weeks ago now drooped their heads, as if they too could sense the weight of what was coming. Behind her, the soft rustle of silk announced her lady-in-waiting's approach. Lady Margaret had served the royal family for nearly 3 decades, and Isabella could read the concern in her weathered face without turning around. The older woman's hands trembled slightly as she set down the morning tea service, the delicate china making the faintest of sounds that seemed to echo through the vast chamber. "Your Highness," Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible. "The physicians have requested another audience. They're waiting in the blue drawing room." Isabella's reflection in the window showed a woman who had aged beyond her 32 years in recent months. Her once bright emerald eyes now held depths of worry that no amount of royal training could conceal. The news she had been dreading was finally here, wrapped in the careful words of the kingdom's most respected doctors. Prince Alexander entered the room with the quiet dignity that had made him beloved by his people. Even now, facing the greatest challenge of their lives, he moved with purpose and grace. His dark hair showed premature streaks of silver, and the lines around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent in prayer and consultation with specialists from across the continent. "My dear," he said softly, crossing the room to stand beside his wife. His hand found hers, and she drew strength from his familiar touch. Together, they had ruled the kingdom of Elderwood with wisdom and compassion for 8 years, but no amount of royal education had prepared them for this moment. The blue drawing room felt smaller than usual when they arrived, despite its grand proportions. Dr. Hartwell, the royal physician, stood beside 2 colleagues who had traveled from the medical universities of neighboring kingdoms. Their faces wore the carefully neutral expressions of men who had delivered difficult news many times before, but Isabella could see the genuine sorrow in their eyes. "Your Majesties," Dr. Hartwell began, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. "We have completed our extensive examinations and consulted with the finest specialists across 3 kingdoms. I'm afraid our initial diagnosis has been confirmed." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Isabella felt Alexander's hand tighten around hers, and she drew upon every ounce of royal composure she possessed. The words that came next would change everything they had planned, everything they had hoped for their kingdom and their family. "The condition is progressive and irreversible," Dr. Hartwell continued gently. "We estimate perhaps 6 months, possibly less. We will do everything in our power to ensure comfort and dignity, but beyond that." He left the sentence unfinished, but its meaning was clear. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of a crown that suddenly seemed impossibly heavy. When she opened them again, she was every inch the princess her people needed her to be. "How long before?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Before it becomes public knowledge?" "The symptoms will become more noticeable within weeks," replied Dr. Morrison, one of the visiting specialists. "We strongly recommend that preparations be made for the transition of duties. The people will need time to understand and accept what is coming." Alexander spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Our daughter, Princess Sophia, is only 16. The Council of Regents will need to be prepared, and the neighboring kingdoms must be assured of stability during the transition." "There is one more matter," Dr. Hartwell said hesitantly. "The research facility in the northern provinces has been developing new treatments. They are experimental and offer no guarantees. But if your Majesty would consider—" "No," Isabella said firmly, surprising everyone in the room. "I will not spend what time remains chasing impossible hopes when my kingdom needs me to prepare them for what is to come." She looked at Alexander, seeing both admiration and heartbreak in his eyes. "We have a responsibility to ensure a smooth transition. That must be our priority now." Later that evening, as the palace settled into its nighttime routines, Isabella and Alexander walked slowly through the portrait gallery. Generations of rulers gazed down upon them from gilded frames, men and women who had faced wars, plagues, and political upheavals. Yet none of their painted eyes seemed to offer guidance for the path ahead. "Do you remember our wedding day?" Alexander asked quietly, stopping before a portrait of his grandmother, Queen Victoria Elizabeth, who had ruled for 67 years. You were so nervous about the crown jewels that you practiced walking in them for hours. Isabella smiled despite everything. And you were convinced you would forget your vows and embarrass yourself before half the continent's royalty. She leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his strength. We've been good partners, haven't we? The best, he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. And we'll face this together, just as we've faced everything else. As they stood together in the quiet gallery, neither spoke of the fear that gripped their hearts. Tomorrow would bring meetings with the Privy Council, difficult conversations with their daughter, and the beginning of preparations that no parent should have to make. Tonight, they simply held each other and remembered the dreams they had shared when the future seemed limitless and bright. Outside the palace walls, the kingdom of Elderwood slept peacefully, unaware that their beloved princess was beginning a battle she could not win. In the months to come, they would witness a love story that transcended the boundaries of life and death, and a farewell that would be remembered for generations as the most heartbreaking and beautiful goodbye in royal history. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of a journey that would test the very foundations of love, duty, and sacrifice. As Isabella and Alexander finally retired to their chambers, they carried with them the knowledge that every remaining moment was precious beyond measure, and every goodbye might be their last. The council chamber had never felt so solemn as it did that gray October morning. Ancient oak panels lined the walls, and the long mahogany table bore the scars of centuries of difficult decisions. Today, it would witness one of the most challenging meetings in the kingdom's history. Prince Alexander sat at the head of the table, his posture straight despite the weight pressing down upon his shoulders. Princess Isabella had chosen to stand by the tall windows, where the autumn light caught the golden threads in her midnight blue gown. Lord Chancellor Pemberton, a man whose family had served the crown for 4 generations, shuffled the papers before him with unusual nervousness. Around the table sat the 12 members of the Privy Council, each one a pillar of Elderwood society. These were people who had guided the kingdom through economic challenges and diplomatic crises, yet the news they were about to receive would test their wisdom like nothing before. My lords and ladies, Alexander began, his voice carrying the authority that came naturally to him. Princess Isabella, and I have called this emergency session to inform you of developments that will significantly impact the succession and governance of our kingdom. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft ticking of the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Lady Catherine Ashworth, the only woman on the council, and a close friend to Isabella, leaned forward slightly. She had noticed the princess's recent absences from public events, and the subtle changes in her appearance that only another woman would recognize. Isabella turned from the window, her emerald eyes meeting each council member's gaze in turn. 3 days ago, we received the final medical assessment from our physicians. I have been diagnosed with a condition that will require me to step back from my royal duties within the coming months. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Lord Pemberton's pen clattered to the table, and several council members exchanged glances of shock and concern. Sir Edmund Hartley, the eldest member at 78, slowly removed his spectacles and cleaned them with shaking hands. Your Majesty, Lady Ashworth said carefully, what exactly are we discussing in terms of timeline and severity? Alexander answered when Isabella remained silent. The physicians estimate approximately 6 months. We need to begin immediate preparations for the transition of duties to Princess Sophia, with a Regency Council to guide her until she reaches her majority. The implications began to settle over the room like storm clouds. Princess Sophia, at 16, was intelligent and well-educated, but she was still years away from the age when she could rule independently. The neighboring kingdom of Westmarch had been showing signs of territorial ambition, and trade negotiations with the eastern provinces were at a critical juncture. What of the Northern Alliance Treaty? Asked Lord Marcus Thorne, the Foreign Secretary. The signing ceremony is scheduled for spring. Our allies will need assurance of continuity. The treaty will proceed as planned, Isabella replied firmly. I intend to fulfill as many of my obligations as possible while I am able. The kingdom's commitments will be honored. Over the following weeks, the palace became a hive of quiet activity. Constitutional scholars worked late into the night, reviewing precedents for early succession and regency protocols. Princess Sophia was briefed on state matters that had previously been years away from her consideration. At just 16, she displayed remarkable composure, though those closest to her could see the fear and uncertainty in her dark eyes that so resembled her father's. The princess spent her evenings in intensive study with her tutors, learning the intricate details of governance that she had expected to master gradually over many years. Trade agreements, military protocols, diplomatic relationships, and domestic policies all became urgent priorities. Her childhood, already constrained by royal duty, suddenly felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Meanwhile, Isabella threw herself into her remaining responsibilities with an intensity that both inspired and worried those around her. She insisted on personally reviewing every detail of the transition plans, from the constitutional amendments required for the regency to the smallest protocols for state ceremonies. Her ladies-in-waiting watched helplessly as she worked through fatigue, and the early symptoms that the physicians had warned would gradually worsen. The first public sign that something was amiss came during the annual Harvest Festival celebration in the capital city of Ravenswood. Isabella had always been the picture of grace during public appearances, but observant citizens noticed that she leaned more heavily on Alexander's arm than usual, and that her usually vibrant smile seemed to require more effort. Lady Margaret, who had been dressing the princess for public events for years, began to notice the subtle changes that broke her heart. The beautiful gowns required small adjustments as Isabella's appetite waned, and the jewelry that had always complemented her radiant complexion now seemed almost too heavy for her delicate frame. Yet through it all, Isabella maintained the dignity and strength that had made her beloved by her people. During a private moment in her sitting room, Isabella called for her personal secretary, Miss Elizabeth Hartwell, daughter of the royal physician. The young woman had grown up in the palace and was one of the few people who could speak to the princess with both formality and genuine affection. "Elizabeth," Isabella said softly, "I want you to begin compiling my personal correspondence. Letters to Sophia for important moments in her future, notes for Alexander, and messages to our people. I want to leave something meaningful behind." Elizabeth's hands trembled as she took up her pen. The princess had always been forward-thinking, but this level of preparation spoke to a reality that the young secretary was not ready to accept. "Your Majesty, surely there's still hope." "Hope is not about denying reality," Isabella replied gently. "Hope is about making the most of whatever time we have and ensuring that love continues even when we cannot." As winter approached, the symptoms that the doctors had predicted began to manifest more clearly. Isabella's energy waned more quickly during public appearances, and she began to delegate certain ceremonial duties to her daughter and husband. The people of Elderwood, though not yet officially informed, began to sense that something precious was slipping away from them. The palace staff, who had served the royal family with devotion for years, found themselves struggling with emotions they had never expected to face. Head butler Morrison, who had overseen Isabella's wedding preparations and countless state dinners, discovered that his usually steady hands shook when he arranged her morning tea service. The kitchen staff began preparing her favorite foods with extra care, as if their love could somehow be infused into every meal. In the royal gardens, where Isabella had spent countless happy hours, the head gardener quietly began planning a memorial garden. Without being asked, he researched flowers that symbolized remembrance and eternal love, wanting to create something beautiful that would honor her memory. The roses that she had loved so much were carefully tended, with plans to preserve cuttings that could bloom for generations to come. Through all of this, Alexander remained steadfastly by his wife's side. He adjusted his own schedule to ensure he could spend every possible moment with her, often working late into the night on state papers so that their days together could be filled with the simple pleasures that had brought them joy throughout their marriage. Their love, tested by the ultimate challenge, seemed to grow deeper and more precious with each passing day. As the first snows began to fall on the kingdom of Elderwood, the royal family prepared for what they knew would be their last Christmas together. The palace would soon echo with both celebration and the unspoken knowledge that time was running short, and every shared moment was a gift to be treasured. December brought with it a crystalline beauty to the kingdom of Elderwood that seemed almost magical. Snow blanketed the palace grounds in pristine white, and the ancient oak trees stood like silent sentinels beneath their frozen crowns. Inside the palace walls, preparations for Christmas had taken on a bittersweet quality that touched everyone from the highest lord to the humblest servant. Princess Isabella had insisted that this Christmas be celebrated with all the traditional grandeur that her people expected. Despite her declining strength, she personally oversaw every detail of the decorations, From the massive evergreen tree in the great hall to the garlands of holly and ivy that adorned every doorway. Her determination to maintain normalcy was both inspiring and heartbreaking to witness. The palace's chief decorator, Master Wilhelm, found himself working with tears in his eyes as he arranged the familiar ornaments that Isabella had collected during her travels as princess. Each bauble and ribbon held memories of happier times, when the future stretched endlessly before the royal family. This year, every decoration seemed to carry extra significance, as if they were creating not just a celebration, but a lasting memory. Princess Sophia threw herself into the preparations with an intensity that worried her parents. At 16, she was trying to shoulder responsibilities that would have challenged someone twice her age. She spent hours learning the intricate protocols of the Christmas court celebrations, practicing her curtsy until her legs ached, and memorizing the names and histories of every noble family that would attend the festivities. "Darling," Isabella said gently one afternoon as she found her daughter practicing her speech for the Christmas Eve ceremony for the 10th time. "Come sit with me." They settled together on the window seat in Isabella's private sitting room, where the princess had spent countless hours reading and embroidering during her years at the palace. The view overlooked the rose garden, now sleeping beneath its blanket of snow, but Isabella could envision how it would bloom again in spring, long after she was gone. "I see you trying to become perfect overnight," Isabella said, stroking her daughter's dark hair that was so like Alexander's. "But that's not what I want for you. I want you to remember that being royal doesn't mean being perfect. It means being brave enough to care deeply about others, even when it hurts." Sophia's composure finally cracked, and she buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "I don't know how to do this without you. I don't know how to be what everyone needs me to be." "Oh, my sweet girl," Isabella whispered, holding her daughter close. "You already are everything you need to be. You have your father's wisdom and your grandfather's courage, and most importantly, you have a heart that loves deeply. That's all any ruler really needs." The conversation was interrupted by Alexander's arrival, and father and daughter worked together to help Isabella to her favorite armchair. The simple movement that would have been effortless months ago now required careful assistance, but Isabella accepted it with the grace that had characterized her entire life. "I have news," Alexander announced, settling beside them with a letter bearing the royal seal of the neighboring kingdom of Valdres. "King Edward and Queen Margaret have requested permission to attend our Christmas celebrations. They want to pay their respects and discuss the Northern Alliance Treaty." Isabella smiled, though the effort was visible. "Of course they're welcome. We must show our allies that Elderwood remains strong, regardless of personal challenges." She paused, then added more softly, "And it will be good for Sophia to interact with other young royals. Princess Helena is near her age, isn't she?" The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a whirlwind of activity. The palace staff worked tirelessly to ensure that everything would be perfect for what many secretly understood might be Princess Isabella's final Christmas. The head chef consulted with Isabella personally about the menu, ensuring that all her favorite dishes would be featured prominently at the Christmas feast. Foreign delegations began arriving in the week before Christmas, their carriages creating elegant processions through the snow-covered capital city. The people of Ravenswood lined the streets to watch, cheering for their visitors, but reserving their loudest applause for glimpses of their beloved princess. Though the official announcement had not yet been made, rumors had begun to circulate, and the citizens' faces showed a mixture of celebration and concern. King Edward of Valdres arrived with his queen and their 18-year-old daughter, Princess Helena, who immediately formed a friendship with Princess Sophia. The two young women spent hours together, and Helena's presence seemed to provide Sophia with the normal companionship that had been lacking in her increasingly formal education. On Christmas Eve, the Great Hall of Ravencrest Palace was transformed into a winter wonderland. Hundreds of candles cast a warm glow over the ancient stone walls, and the massive Christmas tree sparkled with ornaments that had been collected by generations of royal families. The assembled guests represented the finest nobility from across the continent, all dressed in their most magnificent attire. Isabella had chosen to wear a gown of deep sapphire blue velvet, embroidered with silver threads that caught the candlelight like captured stars. The crown jewels had been simplified to a delicate diamond tiara, but she wore them with such natural elegance that no one could doubt her royal bearing. Alexander, resplendent in his formal military uniform, stayed close by her side, his love and concern evident to all who observed them. The traditional Christmas Eve ceremony proceeded with all its ancient pageantry. Carols were sung by the palace choir, their voices soaring to the vaulted ceiling in harmonies that had echoed through the hall for centuries. The royal chaplain delivered a sermon about hope, faith, and the enduring nature of love, words that seemed to carry special meaning for everyone present. When the time came for Princess Isabella to deliver the traditional Christmas address to the assembled guests, she rose slowly from her throne. The hall fell silent as every person present recognized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Her voice, though quieter than in previous years, carried clearly through the great space. "My dear friends and honored guests," she began, her emerald eyes seeming to connect with each person individually. "We gather tonight not just to celebrate the birth of our Savior, but to recognize the precious gift of time we share together. In this season of joy and reflection, we are reminded that love is the greatest treasure any of us can possess." She paused, glancing at Alexander and Sophia, drawing strength from their presence. "The bonds that unite us as families, as friends, and as citizens of our great kingdoms are stronger than any challenge we might face. Tonight, as we celebrate in the warmth of this ancient hall, let us remember that the light we kindle here will continue to burn long after this evening has become a cherished memory." The response from the assembled guests was unlike anything the palace had ever witnessed. The applause began slowly and built to a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Many guests wiped away tears openly, understanding that they were hearing words of profound courage and grace from a woman facing the ultimate test. Later that evening, after the guests had retired to their chambers, the royal family gathered in their private sitting room for their own intimate Christmas celebration. The contrast between the grand public ceremony and this quiet moment emphasized the humanity behind the royal titles. Alexander presented Isabella with a locket containing miniature portraits of himself and Sophia, while she gave him a leather-bound journal filled with her thoughts and memories from their years together. For Sophia, there was a special gift, her mother's personal diary from when she had been 16, along with a letter to be opened on her coronation day. As midnight approached and Christmas Day dawned, the three sat together by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and listening to the peaceful silence that had settled over the palace. Outside, snow continued to fall gently, blanketing their kingdom in beauty and peace. "This has been perfect," Isabella whispered, her head resting against Alexander's shoulder while Sophia dozed in the chair beside them. "Whatever comes next, I want you both to remember this night exactly as it is." Alexander kissed her forehead gently. "Every moment with you has been perfect, my love. Every single one." As Christmas Day arrived with its promise of new beginnings, the royal family of Elderwood faced their future with courage, love, and the unshakable bond that would carry them through the difficult days ahead. January arrived with an unusual warmth that melted the Christmas snow and brought early signs of spring to the kingdom of Elderwood. The unseasonable weather seemed to mirror the strange mixture of hope and sorrow that had settled over Ravencrest Palace. While the gardens began to show hints of new growth, inside the palace walls, everyone was acutely aware that time was becoming increasingly precious. Princess Isabella had made the difficult decision to make a public announcement about her condition. The rumors that had been circulating through the kingdom for months needed to be addressed officially, and she wanted her people to hear the truth from her own lips rather than through whispered speculation. The announcement would be made during the traditional New Year's court session, when representatives from across the kingdom gathered to hear royal proclamations. The preparation for this announcement required careful consideration of every word. Isabella worked closely with Lord Chancellor Pemberton and her closest advisors to craft a statement that would inform her people honestly while reassuring them about the kingdom's stability. She insisted that the focus should be on the strength of the monarchy's foundations and Princess Sophia's readiness to serve, rather than on the tragedy of her illness. "The people deserve honesty," Isabella said during one of their planning sessions, her voice steady despite the obvious effort it required. "They have given me their love and loyalty for years. I owe them the truth, delivered with dignity." Prince Alexander spent these days managing both his own grief and the practical necessities of a kingdom in transition. He worked tirelessly with the Privy Council to ensure that every aspect of governance would continue smoothly. New protocols were established, treaties were reviewed to ensure their validity during a regency period, and relationships with neighboring kingdoms were carefully maintained. Princess Sophia had matured remarkably in the months since learning of her mother's diagnosis. The carefree teenager was gradually transforming into a young woman who understood the weight of responsibility that awaited her. She spent her mornings in intensive tutoring sessions, learning about everything from agricultural policies to international diplomacy, and her afternoons with her mother, treasuring every conversation and shared moment. One particularly warm January afternoon, Isabella requested to be taken to the rose garden where she had spent so many happy hours throughout her life. The head gardener had prepared a comfortable chair among the bare rose bushes, and mother and daughter sat together in a peaceful setting. "Tell me about your favorite memory," Isabella said softly, watching as Sophia considered the question carefully. "The summer when I was 8, Sophia replied without hesitation. "We spent 2 weeks at the summer cottage by Lake Serenity, and you taught me to skip stones. Father was away on state business, so it was just the two of us. You braided wildflowers in my hair, and we read stories under the old willow tree." Isabella smiled, remembering those carefree days when royal duties had seemed less pressing and the future had stretched endlessly before them. "You were so proud when you finally managed to skip a stone 5 times. You insisted on writing to your father immediately to tell him about your achievement. Will you teach me how to be brave like you?" Sophia asked suddenly, her voice small despite her growing maturity. "Oh, my darling," Isabella replied, taking her daughter's hands in her own. "Bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about feeling the fear and choosing to do what's right anyway. You've already shown more courage in these past months than many adults show in a lifetime." The day of the public announcement dawned clear and bright. The Great Hall was filled to capacity with representatives from every corner of the kingdom, from wealthy landowners to humble craftsmen's guild leaders. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation, as everyone present sensed they were about to hear news that would change their kingdom forever. Isabella entered the hall wearing a gown of royal purple trimmed with ermine, the colors of strength and nobility. The crown jewels caught the light from the tall windows, but it was her inner radiance that commanded attention from every person present. Alexander walked beside her, his hand positioned protectively near her elbow, while Princess Sophia followed at the appropriate distance, her young face a mask of composure. As Isabella took her place on the throne, the silence in the hall became absolute. Even the servants stationed around the edges of the room seemed to hold their breath. She began to speak, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "My beloved subjects," she said, her words measured and strong, "I come before you today to share news that affects not only our royal family, but our entire kingdom. After months of careful consideration and medical consultation, I must inform you that I have been diagnosed with a condition that will require me to gradually transfer my royal duties to Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia." The intake of breath from hundreds of people created an audible sound that seemed to echo off the ancient stone walls. Several members of the assembly openly wept, while others sat in stunned silence. Isabella paused, allowing them a moment to process what they had heard. "However," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "I want to assure you that the kingdom of Elderwood remains strong and stable. Princess Sophia has been preparing diligently for her future role, and she will be guided by a regency council of our most trusted advisors. Our alliances remain firm, our treasury is sound, and our military stands ready to protect our borders." She went on to outline the transition plan that had been carefully developed, explaining how government functions would continue and reassuring the assembly that their rights and protections under the crown would remain unchanged. Her words were both a farewell and a promise that the values they cherished would endure. "I ask for your prayers, your patience, and your continued loyalty to the crown," Isabella concluded. "The love you have shown our family throughout the years has been our greatest source of strength. We trust that this love will help guide our kingdom through the challenges ahead." The response from the assembly was immediate and overwhelming. One by one, representatives stood to pledge their continued loyalty and support. Many spoke through tears about what Princess Isabella had meant to them personally and to their communities. The ceremony that was meant to last 1 hour extended to nearly 3 as person after person rose to express their devotion to the royal family. In the days that followed the announcement, the palace was flooded with messages of support from across the kingdom and beyond. Flowers arrived by the cartload from citizens who wanted to express their love and sympathy. Children sent hand-drawn pictures. Elderly subjects shared memories of Isabella's kindness during her visits to their towns, foreign dignitaries wrote letters of support and admiration. The response from neighboring kingdoms was equally touching. Queen Margaret of Valdres arrived personally with her daughter Princess Helena, bringing with her rare medicinal herbs from their kingdom's finest healers and an offer of any assistance that might be helpful. Other royal houses sent their personal physicians, religious leaders offered prayers, and trade partners pledged their continued cooperation during the transition period. Through all of this outpouring of love, Isabella maintained her grace and dignity while privately drawing strength from the knowledge that her life's work had touched so many hearts. She insisted on personally reading as many messages as possible, often moved to tears by the heartfelt words of people whose lives she had influenced without ever realizing it. As February approached, the symptoms that the doctors had predicted began to manifest more clearly. Isabella's public appearances became fewer and shorter, though she continued to fulfill her most important obligations. Her private moments with Alexander and Sophia became increasingly precious, filled with conversations about love, legacy, and the enduring bonds that death cannot sever. The palace staff, who had served the royal family with unwavering devotion, began to prepare for what they all understood was approaching. Yet, even in their sorrow, they found ways to honor their beloved princess, creating small gestures of love and remembrance that would help her family carry her memory forward into whatever future awaited them. March arrived with the promise of spring, but inside the walls of Ravencrest Palace, time seemed to move with the deliberate pace of a funeral procession. The early daffodils that had begun to bloom in the royal gardens served as both a symbol of renewal and a poignant reminder that life continued its eternal cycle, regardless of human sorrow. Princess Isabella spent her mornings in the conservatory now, where the glass walls allowed her to remain connected to the natural world she had always loved, while protecting her from the unpredictable spring weather. The changes in her condition had become more pronounced in recent weeks. Her once lustrous auburn hair had grown thin, and the elegant gowns that had defined her public image now hung loosely on her diminished frame. Yet those who loved her saw something else entirely, a radiance that seemed to grow stronger even as her physical strength waned. Her emerald eyes held depths of wisdom and peace that spoke of someone who had made peace with their fate and found meaning in every remaining moment. Dr. Hartwell visited daily now, his medical bag a familiar sight in the royal quarters. The kind physician had grown fond of the royal family during his years of service, and the professional distance that usually characterized his relationships with patients had long since given way to genuine affection and concern. His consultations with Isabella had evolved from medical examinations to gentle conversations about comfort, dignity, and the practical matters that needed attention. "How much time do we have?" Alexander asked during one of these visits, his voice carefully controlled. They were in Isabella's sitting room, where afternoon light filtered through lace curtains and cast intricate patterns on the Persian carpet. "It's difficult to say precisely," Dr. Hartwell replied honestly. "Perhaps weeks. She's fighting with remarkable strength, but—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear to all present. Isabella, who had been listening from her position on the day bed, spoke softly. "I want to see the rose garden one more time when the flowers begin to bloom. Can you ensure I have that opportunity?" "Of course, Your Majesty," the doctor assured her. "We'll arrange for whatever you need." Princess Sophia had requested to suspend her formal education temporarily so she could spend every possible moment with her mother. The tutors understood completely, and even the most pressing lessons in statecraft seemed insignificant compared to the irreplaceable conversations taking place between mother and daughter. These talks covered everything from practical advice about ruling a kingdom to deeply personal reflections about love, loss, and the meaning of life. "Tell me about the day I was born," Sophia said one afternoon as they sat together in the conservatory, surrounded by the gentle fragrance of blooming jasmine. Isabella's face lit up with a joy that transcended her current circumstances. "It was the most beautiful spring day imaginable. Your father and I had been waiting for months, and when the physicians finally told us you were coming, he was so nervous that he wore 2 different boots to the birthing chamber." She laughed softly at the memory. "You were perfect from the moment you arrived, so alert and curious, as if you were already eager to explore the world around you." "Were you afraid?" Sophia asked. "About becoming a mother, I mean." "Terrified," Isabella admitted. "I worried about whether I would be wise enough to guide you, strong enough to protect you, and loving enough to help you become the remarkable woman you already are. But the moment I held you in my arms, I understood that love gives us strength we never knew we possessed. These intimate conversations were punctuated by visits from dignitaries who came to pay their respects and ensure smooth diplomatic relations during the transition. Isabella insisted on receiving them personally, despite her declining energy. She understood that these meetings served dual purposes. They honored the relationships she had built throughout her reign, while demonstrating to the world that Elderwood remained stable and strong under Alexander's guidance. King Edward of Valdres returned with his wife and daughter, bringing with them a gift that moved Isabella to tears. Princess Helena had spent weeks working with the finest artists in her kingdom to create an illuminated manuscript that told the story of Isabella's reign through beautiful illustrations and calligraphy. Each page depicted a significant moment in her life as princess, from her wedding day to her charitable works to her diplomatic achievements. "This will be kept in our royal library forever," Princess Helena explained as she presented the magnificent volume. "Future generations will know about your wisdom and kindness through these pages." The gesture represented more than artistic tribute. It was a promise that Isabella's legacy would endure beyond her lifetime, inspiring future rulers and reminding the world of what enlightened leadership could accomplish. As March drew toward its close, Isabella asked Alexander to arrange for one final public appearance. Despite her weakened condition, she wanted to address her people personally, to thank them for their love, and to offer them comfort in their grief. The announcement was made that Princess Isabella would speak to the citizens of Ravenswood from the palace balcony, as royal tradition dictated for the most important occasions. On the appointed day, thousands of people gathered in the palace courtyard and surrounding streets. Word had spread throughout the kingdom, and citizens had traveled from every province to be present for what everyone understood would be their final opportunity to see their beloved princess. The crowd was remarkably quiet, showing a reverence that spoke to their deep love and respect. Alexander helped Isabella to the balcony, his arm around her waist providing the support she needed to stand upright. She wore a gown of pure white silk, embroidered with silver roses, a choice that symbolized both purity and remembrance. The afternoon sun caught the silver threads and made her appear almost ethereal as she stepped forward to address her people. The sight of their princess, so obviously frail, yet radiating an inner strength that defied her physical condition, moved many in the crowd to tears before she even began to speak. When she raised her hand for silence, the courtyard became so quiet that her voice carried clearly to even the farthest listeners. "My dear people of Elderwood," she began, her voice clear despite its reduced volume. "I stand before you today not to say goodbye, but to express my deepest gratitude for the love and loyalty you have shown me throughout my years as your princess." She paused, gathering strength for the words that would follow. "You have been my inspiration, my purpose, and my greatest joy. When historians write about our kingdom, they will not remember me for wearing crowns or living in palaces. They will remember me because I had the privilege of serving people who valued kindness above power, wisdom above wealth, and love above all else." The crowd listened in absolute silence, many weeping openly as they heard their princess speak with such grace about her approaching death. Children who had been taught to wave and cheer at royal appearances now stood solemnly beside their parents, instinctively understanding the gravity of the moment. "Princess Sophia will soon take her place as your sovereign," Isabella continued. "She has been raised with the values that you have taught me through your example: compassion for those who suffer, determination to protect what is precious, and unwavering commitment to justice. I ask that you give her the same love and support that you have blessed me with." As she concluded her remarks, Isabella raised her hand in blessing over the assembled crowd. The gesture, simple yet profound, seemed to encompass every citizen of her beloved kingdom. The response was unlike anything in the kingdom's history, not the usual cheers and applause, but a massive, unified prayer that rose from thousands of voices in a harmony that seemed to touch heaven itself. That evening, as the sun set over the kingdom of Elderwood, Princess Isabella sat in her private quarters surrounded by the people she loved most. Alexander held her hand while Sophia read aloud from one of the poetry books they had always enjoyed together. Lady Margaret sat nearby, her needlework forgotten as she treasured these final moments with the princess she had served with devotion for so many years. The palace around them had fallen into the peaceful quiet of evening, but those who kept vigil in the royal quarters knew they were witnessing something sacred, the final chapter of a life lived with extraordinary grace, surrounded by love that would endure long after the last breath had been drawn. "Thank you," Isabella whispered as sleep began to claim her. "For everything. For all of it." As night settled over the kingdom, the citizens of Elderwood looked up at the palace windows and saw the gentle glow of candles that would burn throughout the darkness, symbols of love that no earthly force could extinguish. In the months and years to come, they would remember this time not as a period of ending, but as a testament to the enduring power of a love that had transformed not just a royal family, but an entire kingdom. The goodbye that shattered hearts had also revealed the indestructible nature of true love, proving that some bonds transcend even death itself.